What if a single letter could rewrite everything you thought you knew about your family? Claire had never expected that a quiet afternoon in her grandmother's attic could change her life forever. She had come to the old house with simple intentions, to sort through memories, maybe grab a few photographs for a family album. But the moment she stepped into the dusty space above the kitchen, a strange sense of anticipation prickled her skin. Boxes lined the walls, stacks of forgotten belongings from decades past, each wrapped in layers of dust and time. Mini hook, some things are meant to be found. Her hands brushed over an old wooden chest tucked into the corner, one that had always been there but never called to her before. The lock was rusted, easy enough to open with a careful twist. Inside lay a bundle of letters tied with a ribbon that had yellowed with age. The first thing that struck Claire was the handwriting, delicate, flowing, almost poetic. It was unmistakably her grandmother's, Margaret, yet it carried a tone she had never heard in conversation, vulnerable, tender, and full of unspoken longing. Mini hook, what secrets could words on paper hold? Claire pulled out the top letter, dated 1948. The paper smelled faintly of lavender and thyme, brittle yet somehow alive in her hands. As she read, her heart started to beat faster. The letter was addressed to a man named Daniel. Each sentence seemed to whisper emotions Claire had only ever imagined. Margaret wrote about longing, small stolen moments, and feelings too deep for casual words. She described afternoons spent in the shade of an old maple tree, evenings with books spread across the living room floor, and nights when the air itself seemed to hum with unspoken connection. Mini hook, was this the love story my grandmother had hidden? Claire could feel Margaret's words reaching through the decades, as if her grandmother were speaking directly to her. The letters weren't just a recollection of events, they were alive, pulsing with emotion. Margaret wrote of laughter that felt like music, and a quiet joy that only Daniel could bring her. There was a tenderness in the way she described him, as though she were painting his character in her mind to keep it from fading. And yet, somewhere beneath the joy, Claire sensed a shadow of fear, hesitation, the weight of choices not yet made. Mini hook, why had no one ever spoken of him? Curiosity burned in Claire. How could a love so profound vanish without a trace? Her family never mentioned Daniel. He didn't appear in photographs, wasn't in stories at family dinners, not even a fleeting memory shared in passing. The letters suggested a depth of feeling that should have left a mark, yet history had hidden it. With each page, Claire felt she was peeling back layers of time, stepping closer to the truth of her grandmother's secret life. Mini hook, what changes a life more than love? Hours passed unnoticed as Claire continued reading. Margaret's letters detailed days filled with hope, laughter, and small rebellions against the expectations that surrounded her. Daniel seemed to be her anchor, her confidant, and her challenge all at once. But the letters also hinted at obstacles, family disapproval, societal expectations, and decisions that tugged Margaret in directions she could not ignore. Claire could almost feel the weight of those choices pressing down, shaping the path her grandmother had to take. Mini hook, could love survive when life forces a different plan? Then Claire came across a letter that stopped her cold. Unlike the others, this one had never been sent. The envelope was blank, the ink faded, and the final words trailed off mid-sentence. Margaret wrote with honesty, pain, and a courage that was almost too much to bear. The unfinished letter was like a window left open in a storm, exposing raw emotion that had been safely hidden for decades. Claire's mind raced. Why hadn't her grandmother sent it? What circumstances had prevented her from reaching Daniel, from expressing her feelings? The questions spun in her head, urgent and demanding answers that seemed just out of reach. Mini hook, what if the story you uncover changes everything you believe about someone you love? As she continued through the box, more letters emerged, each revealing fragments of a life Claire had never imagined. There were notes about Daniel's smile, his quiet acts of kindness, and the way he made ordinary moments extraordinary. There were mentions of books shared, walks in early morning mist, and the subtle thrill of a love that was real but forbidden. Each letter deepened the sense that Margaret's life had been richer and more complicated than the cheerful grandmother Claire had known in her childhood. Mini hook, sometimes the past reaches out when you least expect it. Hours blurred into evening. The attic, once just a dusty storage space, had become a portal to another time. Claire felt herself drawn into the narrative, feeling Margaret's joy and heartbreak as if they were her own. And then, just as she unfolded what seemed to be the last letter in the bundle, a sudden sound jolted her out of the past. The attic stairs creaked under footsteps. Someone was coming. Claire's heart leapt, the letter trembling in her hands. She hadn't expected anyone else to be there, and the thought of being discovered holding decades-old secrets sent a thrill and fear through her. Could a love so carefully hidden survive decades of silence? Margaret had always carried a quiet strength, even as a young woman in her small Maine town. She smiled easily and spoke gently, but beneath the surface, her heart held a storm of emotions no one could see. When Daniel first arrived in the town, he seemed like any ordinary man, a quiet bookstore owner with a love for old books, but Margaret's intuition told her he was different. There was something in the way he lingered over poetry, how he noticed the small details in the world, and the softness in his voice that drew her in. Minnie Hook, some connections are instant, yet invisible to the world. Their first real conversation happened in Daniel's little shop, where Margaret wandered looking for a book she couldn't even name. Daniel had noticed her immediately, the way she hesitated at a shelf, reading titles with careful fingers. He smiled politely, offered a recommendation, and then the world seemed to shift. Margaret laughed at his suggestion, and for a moment, it felt as if the rest of the town had disappeared. Their friendship grew quickly, fueled by shared interests and gentle humor. But more than friendship, there was a quiet electricity neither could name aloud. Minnie Hook, what if the heart knows what the mind cannot yet understand? Letters soon became their secret language. After Daniel closed his shop each evening, Margaret would sit by her window, pen in hand, writing about the moments they had shared. She wrote of their walks through autumn leaves, the warmth of sun on their faces, the feeling of being understood in a way no one else could offer. Daniel, in turn, responded in kind, his handwriting echoing her excitement and longing. Each letter was a private world, a place where rules and expectations could not reach them. Minnie Hook, some love must live in shadows to survive. Yet, life was never simple. Margaret's parents disapproved quietly but firmly. They admired Daniel as a man, but they could not accept him as a part of Margaret's future. They had dreams for her that did not include a small-town bookstore owner. There were whispers about stability, about marriage prospects, about propriety. Margaret's heart ached as she read those words, torn between the love she cherished and the obligations she could not ignore. Daniel, too, felt the pressure. He wanted to fight for Margaret, but he carried a past he could not leave behind, an old mistake, a lost opportunity elsewhere, fears that kept him from claiming her openly. Minnie Hook, can love survive when the world says it cannot? Despite the obstacles, their bond grew stronger. Margaret would describe afternoons of reading poetry together, sharing hot chocolate in Daniel's shop while the snow fell outside. They spoke of dreams beyond the town, of places where they could be free, of futures they secretly hoped might exist. Yet, every shared glance and soft laugh was tinged with the reality that the world might never allow their union. Margaret's letters began to capture the bittersweet tension, the joy of being together and the ache of knowing time might steal it away. Minnie Hook, even the sweetest moments can carry the heaviest weight. Then came the turning point. Margaret was expected to consider a marriage arranged by her family's wishes, a practical choice, a socially acceptable path. She tried to suppress her feelings, to keep her love for Daniel a private treasure. But the letters betrayed her heart. One letter, more desperate than the rest, confessed the depth of her longing. I do not want to lose you, Daniel. Yet I am trapped between duty and desire. I wish I could find a way for us to exist openly. The words were honest, raw, and full of fear. Daniel's reply was equally honest, speaking of love restrained, of dreams postponed, of hope kept alive in secret. Minnie Hook, what would you sacrifice for the one you love? Margaret made her choice, stepping into the path her family expected. But the letters never stopped. Each one carried hope, nostalgia, and the promise that, if life allowed, their paths would cross again. They exchanged dreams of the future with a tenderness that spoke louder than words. They described what they would do, where they would go, and how they would live if circumstances were different. Each sentence was a small rebellion, a quiet insistence that their love mattered, even if the world refused to acknowledge it. Sometimes love lives not in presence, but in memory. Claire imagined the young Margaret, sitting by candlelight, writing late into the night. She pictured Daniel reading the letters in his quiet room, feeling the same pangs of longing, the same ache of love constrained by life's rules. The scene was vivid, almost tangible, and Claire felt a mix of awe and sorrow. How many people had lived such hidden lives, carrying love in silence? How much courage did it take to love fully yet remain apart? Some stories are meant to linger, not conclude. The letters ended abruptly in 1948, just when Claire felt she had begun to understand the full depth of their bond. There was no goodbye, no farewell, just a trail of unfinished sentences and unanswered questions. Claire's heart tightened as she realized the letters had never been delivered, the story left suspended in time. Margaret had carried these emotions in secret, a private world of love and loss that shaped her life quietly, unseen by anyone else. Can the past speak to us if we listen carefully enough? As Claire folded the last letter, she found a small photograph tucked inside, a young man with kind eyes and an easy smile, standing in front of a small bookstore. Her breath caught. Could this be Daniel? The resemblance to her own father was faint but undeniable, and the thought that this man had once been such an important part of her grandmother's life sent a shiver down her spine. She felt an urgent need to know what had become of him, to trace the threads of a love that had endured silently for decades. Sometimes finding one truth leads to even greater mysteries. Claire's mind raced as she stared at the photograph. The attic suddenly felt smaller, more alive, as if the air carried whispers of a past she was only beginning to understand. The letters had revealed joy and heartbreak, laughter and longing, a love both beautiful and impossible. And now, the photograph hinted at a story waiting to be uncovered, a life that might still hold answers. Claire knew she couldn't stop here, she had to find Daniel, or at least discover what had happened to him after those quiet, fleeting years with her grandmother. What would you do if the past suddenly reached out to you? Claire stared at the photograph of Daniel tucked in her pocket. Something about his eyes, the quiet warmth, the hint of longing, made her feel she already knew him. She couldn't stop thinking about the letters, the untold love story, and the unfinished promises. It was as if the photograph carried a piece of her grandmother's heart, calling her to uncover what had happened after Margaret had walked away. Some questions demand answers, no matter how long the wait. The next day, Claire began her search. She started small, scrolling through online archives, library databases, and old town records. Daniel Whitman, a name that seemed ordinary, was hard to trace. Most records ended abruptly, and for a moment, Claire wondered if he had disappeared entirely. But something in her gut told her he was still out there, somewhere, perhaps quietly living the life Margaret had imagined for him. Not all stories are easy to find, but they are never truly lost. Weeks passed as she pieced together fragments. An old newspaper clipping mentioned a Daniel Whitman opening a small bookstore in Boston in the 1950s. Another mentioned his volunteer work at the local library, helping children learn to read. Each clue revealed a man devoted to simple joys, quietly passionate about the world around him. Claire felt a strange connection forming, not only to Daniel's story but to the way love can endure silently, even when the heart is broken. Sometimes the trail is faint, yet the path is clear if you follow it. Claire's research led her to a Boston Historical Society. They had records of Daniel's life, preserved in small folders and yellowing documents. Through letters, old photographs, and mentions in local newsletters, she learned that Daniel never married. He ran his bookstore for decades, quietly shaping a community of readers and dreamers. Margaret's name appeared occasionally in passing, in letters or notes he had kept, hinting at a lifelong affection he never let fade. Claire felt tears prick at her eyes. Her grandmother's love had endured, silently and faithfully, for decades. Love can survive, even when it has no witness. The more she learned, the more Claire felt she was following a map drawn by destiny itself. Daniel had lived his life in quiet devotion, respecting the choices Margaret had made, yet never forgetting her. He had loved her without expectation, without claim, simply because it was true. Claire felt both joy and sorrow, joy that her grandmother's love had been so real, and sorrow that the world had not allowed them to be together. Mini-hook, what if the past could speak directly to you? Then came a breakthrough. Among the Historical Society's files, Claire found a small envelope addressed to Margaret in Daniel's careful handwriting. Inside was a letter, folded neatly, still vibrant with emotion despite the years. Daniel had written, "I loved you then. I love you still. I hope life has treated you kindly. If ever you read this, know that you were never forgotten." Claire's hands trembled as she held it. It was a voice from the past, a bridge across decades of silence. Mini-hook, some letters carry more than words, they carry hearts. Claire realized something remarkable. Daniel had kept Margaret's memory alive in the quiet corners of his life, writing letters that might never be sent, treasuring the time they had shared. It was a love that didn't demand presence, that didn't require acknowledgement, yet was as deep as any love openly declared. The more she read, the more she understood the courage it took to love someone completely while letting them go, without resentment or regret. Mini-hook, true love sometimes grows in absence, not presence. She decided to dig deeper. Local bookstores, old acquaintances, anyone who might have known Daniel, became part of her quest. She discovered a woman who had worked with him at his shop years ago. She spoke fondly of Daniel, describing him as gentle, thoughtful, and devoted to his friends and customers. She mentioned how he had often referred to a Margaret, always with warmth and nostalgia, though never specifics. Claire felt a shiver of recognition. The love that had been hidden in letters and memories was still visible in the world, reflected in the stories of those who had known him. Mini-hook, some lives leave traces you can feel, even decades later. Claire's heart pounded with the realization that Daniel's devotion had endured without fanfare or recognition. It was quiet, uncelebrated, yet undeniable. Margaret and Daniel's love had been a private force, shaping their lives in subtle ways. Claire imagined the moments they must have carried in their hearts, stolen afternoons, quiet conversations, laughter, longing gazes. It was a love that had lived in small gestures and unspoken promises, a testament to the resilience of the human heart. Mini-hook, sometimes finding the truth requires patience and courage. And then, just when Claire thought she had uncovered all she could, an unexpected email arrived in her inbox. The sender claimed to have known Daniel personally and mentioned Margaret by name. The message was short, but its impact was enormous. "He always hoped Margaret would find this. You should see what he left behind." Claire's pulse raced. Someone connected to Daniel had reached out across time, bridging the decades with a single line. The letter promised answers, perhaps even revelations Claire had not imagined. Mini-hook, some messages arrive decades late, but they are never too late. Claire felt a surge of excitement and nervous anticipation. The past was calling, offering her a chance to witness a love that had endured silently for decades. She knew that whatever lay ahead would not only reveal Margaret's story more fully, but might also teach her something about love, courage, and the quiet power of devotion. The attic, the letters, the photograph, it all led here. She had no idea what she would find, but she knew she had to follow it. Can a love lost for decades finally find its way home? Claire's heart raced as she stared at the email from the person who had known Daniel. The message was simple but thrilling. A collection of his letters, belongings, and photographs had been kept in a small Boston cafe. It was an invitation to witness the life of the man her grandmother had loved, a man who had never forgotten her. She felt a thrill she could not explain. This was more than curiosity, it was a chance to touch the past and feel Margaret's emotions in a tangible way. Mini-hook, some doors open only when you are ready to see the truth. When Claire arrived at the cafe, she was guided to a quiet corner where a box sat on a table. Her fingers trembled as she opened it. Inside were bundles of letters, each carefully preserved, photographs from decades past, and a small notebook filled with Daniel's handwriting. The pages were filled with his reflections, memories, and, most importantly, his thoughts about Margaret. Every line radiated love, devotion, and the quiet ache of a connection that had never fully ended. Sometimes, love whispers across the years, waiting for the right ears. Claire picked up the first letter. Daniel's words were gentle, poetic, and deeply emotional. He wrote of the afternoons spent together, of walks along the river, of shared dreams that had never been realized. But the letter also revealed his restraint, the way he had loved Margaret from afar when circumstances kept them apart. He had respected her choices, her marriage, and her life, yet never stopped caring. The devotion in the letter made Claire realize how extraordinary a love could be, quiet, patient, enduring, and selfless. True love sometimes grows in silence, not in declarations. As she turned the pages, she found letters addressed directly to Margaret, letters he had never sent. In one, he wrote, "I loved you then. I love you still. I hope the world has treated you kindly. My heart has always carried you." Claire felt tears blur her vision. She could almost hear her grandmother's voice responding, could feel the unspoken dialogue between two hearts separated by circumstances, yet united by devotion. These letters were a testament to a love that endured without needing acknowledgement. Some promises last a lifetime, even if no one witnesses them. Then she found a small photograph tucked into the box, Daniel standing beside his bookstore, older now, with the same kind eyes and quiet smile. His gaze seemed to meet hers across the decades. Claire felt a shiver of connection, as if she were bridging the gap between the past and the present. In that moment, she understood something fundamental: love does not always require proximity, it thrives in memory, in choices, and in the quiet acts of holding someone in your heart. Even decades apart, love can leave a mark on the world. Claire carefully read each note, each photograph caption, each reflection in Daniel's notebook. He had devoted his life to simple joys, books, teaching, friendships, yet Margaret had remained at the center of his heart. He had never married, never forced a reunion, and never allowed bitterness to enter his love. It was pure, unwavering, and beautifully tragic. Claire felt both sadness and admiration. Margaret and Daniel had lived their lives fully, yet their love had been a quiet undercurrent beneath all other events. Some stories are silent, but they echo louder than words spoken aloud. Among the letters, Claire discovered one final envelope, addressed simply, "To Margaret, if she ever finds this." Her hands shook as she opened it. Inside was Daniel's last reflection, written in his old age: "I have carried you through every year, through every day. I have lived with hope that one day you might see these words. My love has never faded. I hope you have been happy, even without me." Claire's tears fell freely now. The emotion was overwhelming, the beauty of a love that had endured without possession, without demand, and without expectation. Some hearts are too big for ordinary time. Claire sat back, clutching the letters. She imagined Margaret reading them, decades ago, understanding the depth of Daniel's devotion, perhaps feeling the same longing and gratitude. The thought brought a warmth to her chest. Her grandmother had loved, deeply and sincerely, and had been loved in return. The story was more than romantic, it was human, filled with courage, restraint, and the bittersweet reality of life's choices. It was a love that had shaped two lives without needing validation from the outside world. Love is sometimes measured not by presence, but by persistence. Then Claire noticed something else in the box, a small key and a note from the sender. It read, "Daniel wanted you to have this, Claire. He always hoped Margaret's story would continue through you." Her curiosity spiked. What could the key unlock? Was there a hidden place Daniel had left for Margaret, or perhaps something meant for her granddaughter to discover? The thought made her pulse quicken. The past had reached across decades, bringing the story forward, inviting her to be part of it. Some endings are also beginnings. Claire stepped outside the cafe, the letters tucked carefully in her bag. The city around her felt different somehow, quieter, more alive, as if the echoes of Margaret and Daniel's love lingered in the streets, the buildings, and the autumn wind. She imagined her grandmother smiling, perhaps finally at peace, knowing that her story had been discovered and cherished. Claire's heart was full, but a question remained: what had Daniel meant with the key? And was there another layer of the story still waiting to be found?